Oh,
Alrighty, we are live.
yay! We are live. Welcome, everyone. Sequoia and I were meeting before this, so we are giggly. Um, Welcome to the Reclaiming Soul Work podcast, where we are reclaiming the sacred and soul. Wait, was I supposed to start? Okay. Where we are reclaiming the sacred and soul work for healers, counselors, practitioners, and social workers, one episode at a time. I am your co-host, Biani, and my friend. Would you like to introduce yourself, friend?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. Happy Pride. Happy Monday. My name is Sequoia. I use she and her pronouns. And we're going to get into some things today, but
Mm-hmm.
based on, just who we are and also the conversations that we were having literally right before we hopped on this live.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge like all the things that are going on right now, in our respective cities. There is just so much happening. And Biani and I was having a conversation about grief. And, we were talking about it from not only just lived experience and, how we have been navigating just a lot of hard and challenging things that are going on, but then also, supporting our clients and then thinking about it from this perspective of our profession and capitalism and things like that. So, yeah, just want to acknowledge that. The other thing that I want to do also is even though it says that we're live, I want to go to YouTube really quickly and just make sure that we're live. Okay.
I appreciate that. And while you do that, I just want to say how much I appreciate you grounding us in, where we are and what we're bringing today, holding that grief. I feel that grief in my heart today. And I'm taking deep breaths, and holding space for all of us who are really dealing with and navigating with grief. Um, and just, the grief is there, the loss is there, the sadness. And we want y'all to know that we're like holding it with you too. Um, it's been really, really like disappointment after disappointment, loss after loss. And we all like seem to know it really well these last couple months in a way that might not have been. I don't know. Actually, I don't know what that means. But yeah, the loss feels really big and immense right now. So just holding y'all in like a lot of warmth and love right now. Um, yeah. Yeah. I'm
Yep.
sad and I'm feeling grief, but I'm also holding gratitude to be here with you all.
Yeah. And it's just kind of it's been one thing after another a little bit. Well, not a little bit, a lot of it. It's been one thing after another. And just honoring that the place that we're in is super important. I think it's important for us as practitioners to, acknowledge where we are with things. We both not identify, occupy bodies, that resemble just a lot of the points of violence, harm,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, like that's real. And,
Mm-hmm.
not pretending like it's not happening or, coming from this place of, and I feel like it ties into this conversation that we're going to have today about decolonization, within like spirituality and social work. But, coming from this place as if, it's not impacting us, it's not affecting us, or like we transcended our identities in this way where these things don't impact us, that's not real.
Mhm.
We both live in and come from neighborhoods where we experience this, a lot of the times alongside our clients, just like our
Mhm.
clients, and so, yeah, yeah, just want to be real about that.
I can't stop nodding enough because it's true.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot, and it is tied to our conversation around like what we need to unlearn to really cultivate and practice a decolonized way of being as practitioners, as people,
Hmm.
as being in the system. And yeah, like what does it mean for us to be doing this work and being holding space for clients, having the experience and sharing that experience? I hear a lot of white practitioners sort of be like, no one ever trained me for this. Like I remember when the pandemic had just started and a lot of white practitioners were like, I don't know how to do this work while I'm navigating this right alongside them. And a lot of times I wanted to be like, welcome to the club. Like if you are a black or brown or practitioner of the global majority, like that is our reality, like doing this work. We end up being we end up sharing similar experiences with our clients a lot of the time. And yeah, for Sequoia and I, because we grew up in cities that were also impacted by systemic oppression and violence, like we know this really well. So I don't know. I used to really get under my skin when maybe like white folks and people who didn't have like the experiences we had, the naivety or something, or just like the willingness not to really explore that or something. Maybe that was my like really, really okay.
Yeah, I appreciate, just this processing and kind of thought that we're going down, and also don't want to um recreate or perpetuate, these same types of kind of conversations, right? Because before the pandemic, practitioners, social workers, however, folks that are just in the helping profession or, just supporting other people, right? Like people are doing have been doing disability justice and advocacy, for years. And so that experience of, how do I navigate this alongside my clients? There have been people that have been doing this work, and of course not directly related to the pandemic or anything, but just in different situations, different
Mhm.
intersections. And so, yeah, I just think that it was important for us to kind of start off acknowledging like where we are, where our environments are right now, as we get into this topic. And
And thank you
so,
for
yeah,
centering that. Thank you for centering that, friend, like around like people have been doing this work and
for
we need to
sure,
remember
for
that. Yeah.
sure. So today we're going to get into talking about what it means to be a spiritual social worker and practitioner and how we can cultivate a spiritual framework that centers the decolonization of Western practices. This episode discusses the path of becoming a spiritual practitioner, social worker, therapist, however you identify, and how or who is committed to the process of unlearning, learning, and relearning to cultivate a spiritual framework that is rooted in challenging all the ways that we've learned that does not serve our communities. So we believe that integrating spirituality into your work requires that you are in constant relationship with the process of decolonization. We strongly encourage folks and those in practice to seriously consider that this is a lifelong journey of learning and unlearning, and we are never not in this process of decolonizing spiritual healing work, right? Because folks evolve and grow, things happen. We were just speaking about the pandemic. Who would have thunk that we would be in this
Hmm.
situation in our lifetime? and just even the ways that we've been navigating that and the ways that we've
Mhm.
had to adjust, our daily practices is a direct example of, how the process of decolonization is continuous, right? So yeah, we invite folks to, remain open related to this conversation. Because we're going to get into some things about, not only our programs that we went through, for like school certifications, trainings, and things like that. But then also like some aspects of, socialization, our culture, and things like that. So you might need to come back, to this episode and check in again. We're going to be sharing resources. Get a pen and a paper, get a notebook so you can jot some stuff down. Yeah. What
Oh,
you think,
yay.
Biani?
I love that. I love the invitation to remain open and come back to it too if you need to watch it a couple times. Um, so I want to tell you a little bit about who we are. Like Reclaiming Soul Work is a heart-centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers. And we're really committed to exploring the intersection of magic, of spirituality, identity, ancestral connections through the lens of tarot, divination, mysticism, mental health, and everything in between. And I want to introduce myself. My name is Biani. I use she, they pronouns. I want to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on unceded Lenni Lenape territory. Some people know this place as Philadelphia. And I am a practitioner, therapist, tarot reader, a parent of three, and my decolonization practice is every day. So I say that because I feel like it's important for people to, we're sharing with you what we're learning, and we're also in that practice every day. So just wanted to say that. And I think that's it for an intro. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, Sequoia, or we want to move right in?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So my name is Sequoia. I use she and her pronouns. I currently live in Anchorage on Denaina land. Um, I wear quite a few different hats, but identify as a caregiver. Um, I'm a therapist, an artist, a business owner. I'm queer. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say for today. I really enjoy conversations on decolonization practices, you know, and in the social work field, and we'll get more into this, but in the social work field, there's definitely been like, I'm just going to say it. It's been trendy to be talking about abolition within the social work field specifically over the past few years. And so, this this kind of parallel topic of decolonization is super important.
Mm,
And I also think still very not really controversial, but a little bit, depending on
mm.
who and where you're having the conversation about decolonization, abolition, in social work. So,
No,
yeah.
you're absolutely right. And spirituality, like weaving all of that, I
Mm-hmm.
think you're right. I
For
still feel like
sure.
there are not a lot of spaces for those intersections. You're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. So we say that, y'all, so y'all can understand that what we're doing, I would say offer us some grace because we're also making space for conversations that aren't necessarily usually had. And if they are, it really happens in really intimate spaces. I guess I will speak for myself. Like they kind of happen in spaces that um, there's a little bit more trust built, maybe, or not. I don't know. We're talking about our experiences with school, so that's starting to come up for me. But um, yeah, we're really excited for this topic, for today's topic, because we really feel like it's like thinking about spiritual social work, or you're a counselor or a practitioner, and the ways that decolonizing your practice is really critical to the path of doing this work. So for us, we feel like if spirituality and social work or counseling or practitioner helping profession kind of work goes together, for us, this means that decolonization is a critical part of this process. Like, basically, you can't say spirituality and social work go together and not talk about decolonization. We believe that all three go together. Like, you cannot talk about being spiritual and not talking about decolonization. We feel like that union is important. And last week, the last episode, we talked about how we see spirituality and social work intersect. And we also discussed how our own personal experiences and processes shaped and influenced our work as spiritual social workers. And for us, spirituality and social work go together. And for this to be true and lived in practice, decolonization is a critical part of this process. It is the bridge, it is the thread that brings it all together. Spiritual social work is a paradigm that always is in constant relationship to the process of unlearning, learning, and relearning. So for us, decolonization is an important part of the journey. The personal is political, the political is spiritual, and the personal is embodied liberatory spirituality. So, the personal is political, the political is spiritual, the spiritual is political, all of that, y'all. So yeah, that's what we wanted to say. And now we kind of want to get into how we want to imagine how we decolonize our practices. And actually, we want to share a little bit of our journey around like how we think about this journey of decolonizing our spiritual practices needs to happen both personally and professionally. So again, this is an invitation for us to really imagine our personal and professional lives. And also even I'm saying that out loud and thinking too, like that, I don't want to construct that binary either, like personal and professional. No, like there's no separation here. It's interesting how the limits of language can also make it hard.
Mm-hmm.
You get caught up, so I'm really aware of that. And again, as we mentioned in our last episode, and it bears repeating, we believe it is important for our clients to have space to bring in their spiritual interests, their curiosities, their cultural, their ancestral practices into their work. So it's important, right? And part of this, we know in our trainings that we haven't really been trained in that way. We haven't been trained to think about the role that spirituality plays, that culture plays as a part of somebody's wellness and healing and liberatory practice. So we really think it's important as spiritual social workers and counselors that you do this personal work too, so that you can better support your clients and folks that you're in community with in integrating it. So we're each going to share a few of the ways we have decolonized our spiritual practices and how it has shaped our journey, both for, us and in our client work. And actually, maybe before we can also talk about our experiences like in school too, if we wanted. I want to like kind of invite that. So you're welcome to start while I drink some water because I am hot.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of start off by talking a little bit about, and I apologize for the noise in the background, how
I
we
don't hear.
kind of came to the spiritual framework of unlearning, learning, and relearning. I think that that's such a beautiful way to think about decolonization. I think it's a beautiful way to think about, spirituality, social work. And so, I also don't want to limit it just to folks that may not identify as like a social worker, a practitioner, specifically in like the helping profession or even mental health, right? Like this is a spiritual framework for anyone that's doing work and you want to think about decolonization specifically, right? Related to your practice, your profession, whatever it is that you're engaging in, whenever you want to check in with yourself, about how you're working towards decolonizing yourself. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I want to kind of share is, we're throwing around this word decolonization, and Biani, if you want, like, please definitely, when you kind of hop in here, I want to define decolonization for myself, like what does that word mean? We see it, it's
Mhm.
kind of a buzzword. I used the word trendy a little bit ago related to abolition, right? But when I think about decolonization, I'm talking about like, and I wrote down a few things here: deconstructing, dismantling, disrupting colonized beliefs related to power, oppression, and privilege. So,
Mhm.
how am I thinking about the ways that my beliefs, values around just the way that I navigate things are from a colonized perspective, right? Am I checking in related to the places of privilege that I occupy? Am I checking in related to the places of power that I occupy, and so on, right? Um, I think especially within like BIPOC communities, BIPOC spaces, dynamics, we bypass that. Like we think, or we're under this like I don't know, impression, collective idea that because we are marginalized, that we can't perpetuate power or these same type of dynamics when we do, we may not engage in those type of dynamics with white people, but you can absolutely perpetuate white supremacy, power, oppression, privilege, whatever, towards and on other BIPOC people. And so if you're not like, it makes me think about this conversation that I recently had with someone. They are doing some co-director work with this local nonprofit, and they recently came onto this nonprofit board, and their focus in our conversation, was, yeah, like we're really excited, we're recruiting a lot of BIPOC people, and I told this person, I'm like, me as a Black person, that doesn't always make me feel comfortable, like knowing that the space is predominantly BIPOC. We can be as violent as white people can, and so this kind of bypassing of that is harmful. You miss the place to really be in this mode of awareness, about these dynamics and also these internalized dynamics. So that was a whole lot. Um,
You was bringing the fire. I appreciate it. I I appreciate it. It wasn't a lot. It was just right. And I think when you say decolonization, I love that you're like, hey, awareness, right? Like it's also a practice of awareness. Like we have to, it's also about self accountability, like holding ourselves accountable too,
mhm,
because we do have a colonized mind that we work on deconstructing on the daily.
mhm,
I
for
love that.
sure. Yeah, and it goes into, and you and I have talked about, and this is a conversation. Well, I feel like this could be a conversation for today, but you know, just around like spiritual bypassing, and how we've talked about, like the law of attraction and the dynamics of abuse, and in spiritual, kind of spaces, there's this idea that you've attracted your abuser to you, and like how to break that down. And so when I think about this again, bringing it back to being in this place of decolonizing as a BIPOC person, you can't bypass that. You haven't, and let me, I don't want to keep saying we, haven't transcended colonization in that way where we're not, where we haven't internalized our experiences, you know. And when I'm doing my consulting work, I tell folks all the time, sure, You can say you have this mission, you can say you have these values, you can say that you have these intentions, but if you aren't actively working on these things, it's not happening. You can say that you're an anti-oppressive organization or board, but what are you doing every 3 months to really be checking in on that? And if you can't answer that, it's not happening. So I could
Yes,
go
take a
on and on
breath.
and on.
I love it. I love it. Well, you know what it's reminding me of too, that I think we make this assumption that we set up, like we do a training and then we're done with it, right? Like we call ourselves this thing, right? Like we start to name ourselves this thing, like we are progressive and we are anti-racist, or you can put a name adjective there. And then it's like we try to like not take responsibility anymore, as if undoing the colonial framework isn't a daily practice. Like we're in it still, right? We might not be in what happened in the past, right? Like what our ancestors have experienced, or people like who've been marginal, like who've been historically like who experienced violence because of supremacy culture and whiteness and violence, I mean, the whole spectrum. But I think it's interesting that every time people call themselves these things to try to act like they're not accountable to it anymore. I don't know. It just feels like, and I think you're right about bypassing. We see it in spiritual spaces, like a lot of bypassing around, it gets like spirituality gets used as a way to harm people. And that's the thing around bypassing that gets really dangerous. Like, yeah, the way the law of attraction was really misunderstood and misused to cause more harm. Oh, well, you attracted that, or like this idea that like it's your fault you attracted that kind of person. What? Okay, like this is not the and we see that in other spaces too. I mean, I'm just thinking about my experience in grad school. I feel like there was so much bypassing going on. But you're right. I mean, it's a constant practice of unlearning, learning, relearning. Like that's happening every time. It's not something that stops because you had a training 3 months ago. It's really daily, that practice of being aware of how you're showing up and how you're impacting others. And yeah, we've been talking about it. That's been our framework. Unlearn, learn, relearn. It doesn't stop. It doesn't end.
You mentioned your time in grad school. You want to talk about that a little bit here?
Wait, but you were saying something. That's why I stopped. You mentioned something else. Oh, all right. I think I lost it after you offered us the framework. Okay. So my grad school experiences. So this is what I'll say. We want to invite you to imagine like all that you've learned to get you to this place as a person who might be somebody in a helping profession. Doesn't have to just be social work. And just imagine, right? Like how there were many things you learned that really benefited you and got you to this place. But there were also things that you've learned that actually did not benefit you or like the people you have worked with or served. And I want to put that into context because, in my graduate school training, I felt like I had to hide that I was a witch, that I was a bruja. I felt like there wasn't really a place for spirituality, especially as somebody who felt like also my practice was very like Black, feminist, queer oriented, right? So for me, it was like naturally spirituality and intersectionality, all that was my practice, right? And there wasn't really a lot of space in grad school for that. And I think a lot of my experience in the school that I went to that was training us psychodynamically tried their best to like take out the soul work in our training. Like act like spirituality didn't belong there, that soul sacredness didn't belong there. And also acknowledging that I was like one of a few Black people in the program. Even in the clinical track, I think I was the only Black person in my class sometimes. And I'm acknowledging too that I'm a Black Latinx person, right? So that is complicated too, because I am not African American, right? And that's not that's not my story, and I found that sometimes in certain spaces, especially like the non-Black folks and white folks, would project a lot of expectation from me based on how I looked. Um, and I think the experience in grad school was traumatizing. Like, I learned a lot and I'm grateful for what I've learned, but it also meant that I had to hide a lot of my parts to like really survive the program. And when I graduated from my MSW program, it didn't really change. Like, even the training programs to keep this license, right? Like, to be able to keep my licensure, I have to do a certain number of credits every 2 years to keep my license. Those programs, those training institutions look just like my grad school experience. And again, devoid of spirituality, of intersectionality, of queer spirituality, of decolonized practices. Like, a lot of these spaces weren't really built for us, for people that look like me, or Sequoia, or, other folks, right? And it often felt that I was hiding parts of who I was. And so when I entered the field and was offering like psychotherapy, and my clients would bring, hey, like they were talking about astrology and tarot and all the things that I'm super passionate about. And my training, in a lot of ways, they trained me to be less of myself. I didn't even know how to show up for my clients in the beginning. It's really sad, actually. I reflect on it now. And that was, like seven years ago, or actually more longer. But, I reflect on it now, and it's really sad that there were some clients I didn't really let really see me, and I think, of course, we can talk about the way that we're trained to think that we're like this blank slate, and that we're not humans in relationship to our clients in whatever form that would be. Because I also was a teacher in a past life, and I felt that way too. In my teaching programs, they would act like we weren't in relationship to the students we were working with. But yeah, just thinking about how I yearned to feel connected to folks, but I felt like I had to hide that because it wasn't, quote unquote, like appropriate. And through a process of spiritual work, really, and also reclamation, I really had to unlearn. And I'm still unlearning, because it's a daily practice, but unlearning the ways that I was sort of taught to be less of who I was, supposedly in the service of the client. And really, it wasn't serving them, and it wasn't serving me.
Yeah, I appreciate that reflection. I think it's definitely just an important place to constantly, well, no, not constantly, I don't want to use that word, a place to process. A lot of times we go to school and then we put a lot of those experiences, depending on what they are and in what, kind of settings you're in, you put those, that experience on the shelf, right? Especially when you are more of a seasoned, practitioner, your focus is more on the continuing education units, that you mentioned, right? Like that aspect of your learning. But there's a lot there, related to processing how you show up, in these professional spaces. And so when we started to think about this framework, I sat down and reflected on, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to share related to unlearning, learning, and relearning? And, some of the places that I think about. So I, have taught at a few different universities in the behavioral and social sciences department, and then also in the School of Social Work. And when I talk to specifically like my social work students, I talk about, theoretical approaches. So what are the lenses that you're going to bring not only in the therapy room in your therapy sessions, but then also if you're a caseworker, if you are working in healthcare, how are you looking at your clients? How are you advocating for them? What are the systemic lenses that you are processing their needs through, right? Like, are you processing their needs through a lens of theories that predominantly apply to white men or the white community? Or are you looking at folks through a somatic perspective, from a critical race perspective, right? So on and so forth. The other place, that I was thinking about too was like supervision. So when I'm doing supervision with folks, how am I structuring my sessions? How am I making this accessible, for other social workers? What types of managerial approaches am I, kind of talking to my students through? Is this more of a collaborative supervision session, or am I just talking at them? You know, um, I was thinking about business practices and partnerships. Who do I build relationships with that I potentially feel like could be a client? You know, how am I cultivating those relationships and building those relationships? Am I doing that more from a community care perspective? Am I approaching clients that I feel like, or businesses or partnerships or opportunities where I feel like, I can really impact systemic change within the organization and so on, right? Nonprofit boards, like what we just talked about. One of my more recent experiences with someone on a nonprofit board, right? Like, am I talking to them about, just the ways that they are showing up in the community, the ways that they're partnering with the community. Also, how are they training their board members, right? Is it from a decolonized place, or are you sitting in the same type of training that you would in any other, type of board? Are folks talking about bypassing, so this idea of, oh, let's make sure that we, recruit by, well, let me not say it like that. Like, let's make sure, but we're centering recruiting more BIPOC people on this particular board, and it's like, well, that's fine, that's good, and also you can't bypass certain things or come to the board thinking that because you have more BIPOC folks on there that there won't be any type of white supremacy perpetuated, right? Yeah, so those are the kind of places that I was thinking about, related to this topic of unlearning, learning, relearning. Um,
I
yeah,
like that you gave us different like settings to consider, right? Like how we apply those frameworks. And it's making me think about how like in direct service, like a lot of what I've found that I do is really like deal with it head on, right? Like be honest, like let's talk about the role that spirituality plays. Let's also hold that some of these issues you might be bringing up, let's look at it through a larger scale, right? Like what role does systemic oppression play in our wellness, quote unquote. Um, so it made me think of like some frameworks to think about with like one-on-one. And I also really like too that you are creating spaces in your work to have people really be thoughtful and critical about like how y'all this don't go away just because you did one thing, and I think part of it in our culture, we're so like this quick fix or this immediate gratification. Like I think that is also a very colonial sort of way of thinking. um this idea of like urgency and um
yes,
happening on time. What is time, right? Like whose time does it happen on, right? Like there's ways that we even think about language, like something earlier when I was talking about personal and professional, like even language, um can really align with like not just colonized thinking, but the practice, right? Like the colonized practices, like just it's in everything, y'all. So like I really appreciate you giving us the perspective of like in relationships and in different settings. And then I want to add to like it's even in our language, it's how we relate to others, it's what happens in crisis, you know. I like a personal experience or something that happened recently, or actually something I've been noticing when I used to work when I was at a group practice, that I felt like when people were in crisis, they really compromised a lot of the efforts we were making towards like decolonization. And these are like
Yes.
people in the majority. And I think it's real for, oh yeah, I appreciate, and you probably got a story, friend, but like, I think urgency is really dangerous. And especially in supremacy culture and like white supremacy and predominantly like, and not just white spaces by like numbers. I'm talking about like the thinking, like if we treat everything urgent, we're going to miss things. You know, we're really going to miss things. And sometimes I think this is a part of like colonial thinking, like, and I've been harmed in certain spaces that profess being progressive. The minute something was urgent, everything that was worked on was just not like it was out the window, you know. And the most vulnerable were like, oh shoot, we are on our own now, you know. And so yeah, I'm even thinking about, you mentioned the somatic, like that's something that I really encourage, and also something I practice for myself. Like, what does my body tell me, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
part of the effects of colonization is that we've been disconnected. In order for us to survive, we kind of disconnect from our bodies. We just have to sometimes. I'm not saying that I'm encouraging that, but that has been the experience, right? That we are kind of, it's so hard for us to be in our bodies when we're surviving. And that's part of like the colonial project. So even decolonization as an invitation to slow down, to notice your breath, to be in your body, to really notice when urgency starts to show up. What do you notice in your nervous system? How's your speech? You know, what do you feel? Are you more thirsty? Or, you know, there's like kind of paying attention to what happens when colonization or like that kind of thinking and frame is front and center. And one invitation too, when we're thinking about this framework of unlearn, learn, relearn, what do you need to unlearn about this culture of urgency of, you know, and what did you learn? What did you learn about urgency, right? I think that's important because in our culture, we get rewarded for pushing through, you know, and I think we need to unlearn that, because I don't think we need to push through, right? We sometimes we need to sit with things, and then if we make space for examining what we learned and then unlearning it, we make space for the process of remembering or learning again those ways, those practices that always existed in our families, in our ancestral practices. Like when we unlearn, we make a lot of space to learn again, to remember those practices that have always existed, that are decolonial in nature. And so, you know, I mean, this is what we mean, y'all. Like this union is important. Like it's not, oh, my professional life or my personal life. Like this is a practice for all of us in every aspect of our life, and it's daily, and it's spiritual, and it's holy work to be able to unlearn, learn, and relearn. This work is
Mm-hmm.
sacred.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yes, again, like your spiritual practice must include um, a commitment and a dedication to like decolonizing, wellness, healing, your relationships, like every aspect, how you show up to work, who you work with, the people you hire in your board, the people that, you know, like it's in every aspect. And I think if we slow down, we can start to bring in that awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate, you know, your examples, your thoughts. Um, I, you know, I just I just kept shaking my head at this piece about, urgency, like urgency is violent AF, you know, like it is the worst. And I like my mind goes to really conflict. Um, and I think about that in organizing spaces, and I think I'm including that because of some recent interactions that I've had, but more, more intentionally about grieving, certain spaces and taking the time to actually acknowledge like, oh, I'm sad that this happened, or oh, I'm sad that this is over, or whatever, or I'm sad that, this group dynamic is being dismantled because of blah, 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 right? And I feel like this framework um, allows for not only some grief work, but then also, it's an offering to slow down, it's an offering to be reflective of things that are inevitable, when you are working with people really in any type of dynamic, and you need to reflect on where are you, where are you in this, in it, um, yeah, and I really appreciate this framework um, for a lot of different reasons, and on here I have, as well, like repair work. When we think about decolonization, we think about spirituality and social work, what not only like what is conflict resolution practices, but what's the repair work, right? Because if you are focused on, or if you, are intentional about repair work, you're acknowledging that you understand that conflict is a part of, it's just a part of the dynamic. It's just a part of the experience. That's what I want to say, and it's not good or bad, it just is. And you have something in place where, again, you're acknowledging the resistance to urgency, because I feel like conflict is something that speeds a lot of things up. um and yeah, I hope that what I'm saying is making sense, like I'm connecting my thoughts here.
Oh, it's clear. It makes
Okay.
sense.
Okay.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I muted myself but yeah, it makes sense. Like, I think we might have to have an episode talking about relationships, conflict,
Mm-hmm.
repair, and rupture, because um, you and I have had conversations about that, and it's just like really juicy. Um, and I also agree. I feel like conflict, rupture, and repair happen in relationships. And
Yeah.
I wish that we would just be more honest about it, and it doesn't mean it's easy, y'all. It's hard. It's hard.
It's so hard.
But it's like sometimes it's necessary. And I think
Mm-hmm.
conflict is really the space where we really get to grow together or apart, however it happens. But I, it's also part of the colonial kind of project to make us feel like we're supposed to avoid conflict, or that if conflict happens, that's it. Like there's always like we never talk about rupture or repair in this society, in this system that we're in. Um, and it's tied to also how we don't talk about grief work as a part of healing work. Like it's, so you're not rambling, friend. I really see the connections, because grief work is a part of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
in our culture, we really run away from grief.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I completely, and grief work, repair work, that's a part of, it's a part of social work, you
yes,
know.
I love that.
It's a
Yeah.
part of social work, because
Mm-hmm.
we're in these community spaces, and I think that is one of the things that is so violent to me about nonprofit settings a lot of the times, is, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to open us with where we really are, just related to the things that are happening, right? Like, let's not pretend like
Right.
we're not grieving, we're not upset, we're not frustrated, we're not angry, we don't have rage about the things that are happening in our community, to our neighbors, to people that we know, and things like that, right? And that is the thing that burns my biscuits about nonprofit settings, is this pretending like everything is okay, this pretending like we're going to have funding for next year, this pretending like grief doesn't exist here, or conflict doesn't happen here, and things like that, this default to white supremacy in these situations, because we're pretending like we've transcended these dynamics, because we're in this space and we have these degrees and we're supposed to show up different or better than our clients or something like that, um yeah.
I also have to add, like, you're talking, I appreciate you mentioning the nonprofit, and I felt like grad school was like that too. And maybe what we're talking about is like the institutional harm that continues to be done to us, because I felt the same way in my grad program. I remember one semester, I think it was like right after well, yeah, actually a few events happened while I was in grad school, like really big major events, and I can't remember right now which one. And like nobody in my Mike Brown, nobody wanted to talk about it. It had just happened and no one was talking about it. And I'm sitting there like, wow, really? Like, really? Anywho, I know I'm not even going to get into it, but you're right. Like, I think nonprofit, education, like even the fact that we expect young people to just go to school. I was floored by, after some of the unfortunate events that happened the last couple of weeks, and people just were supposed to go back to work, supposed to just go back to school. I mean, I get it that there's reasons for it. I'm not dismissing any of those factors, y'all. I was a teacher before too. I get it. A lot of times those spaces are safe for young people. I get it. What I don't get, and this is connected to the culture of urgency, is the expectation we have to just show up and be doing this work and putting aside all our humanness, And I think to your point, like, you're right. I'm grateful that we started this episode holding the reality of our grief, because we are in it, y'all. We're swimming in it with y'all too. And the pain and the rage, like, I'm in it too. I feel it every day, just like I'm supporting folks that I'm in community with. And the fact that part of this culture is like this, the pressure of urgency, the avoidance of conflict, the avoidance of repair, the avoidance of grief, the avoidance of, just kind of doing things business as usual.
It's white supremacy.
Yes,
It's just white supremacy, just capitalism.
It is capitalism, is colonization. It is,
and it's disconnection from the body. I'm sorry to interrupt you,
absolutely.
but I just want to bring that point in, like you
you're
said,
right.
it is just this disconnection from the body, like completely.
Absolutely. It's all right. It's and they rely on us for that, right? Like, they depend upon us to just be like there's a reason, right? Like, none of this is a coincidence. It's similar to what our ancestors have experienced, right? Like, you're right, like the disconnect from the body, because if we connected to our bodies, we would have to be aware. And then we would have to start this process of unlearning and learning and relearning, this process of like decolonizing, this practice of anti-colonial strategies and practices, and living in alignment with like the practices that have always existed, that this culture tries to appropriate, which is like my other side, like pet peeve. I love that burns my biscuits. I love that. But this burns my tostones, okay? I cannot stand how some of like our training, some of these credentialing, like therapy modalities, are actually indigenous practices that y'all try to appropriate and then make me pay for it and charge 5 figures, close to 4 to 5 figures for trainings that our ancestors or like indigenous healers and practices have existed before. that just burns my tostones. I swear. It just like, it's one of the things I'm just like, so y'all repackaging this thing and calling it blah, blah, blah therapy. And you don't credit any of the folks that you learned this from, which is
Mm-hmm.
also the danger of academia, that they act like they're
Mm-hmm.
producing new knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That really burns me too. Like, you're not producing new knowledge. No knowledge is just new and divorced from prior knowledge. It's built upon, it's scaffolded, right? It's built upon prior knowledge. But even in, in academia, it's this idea that they produce new knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That burns my tostones. And I do not like my tostones burnt. I know
I
we're
wanted
over.
No, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
I wanted to circle back to what you mentioned about, this disconnection from the body, and on my Instagram, I had just kind of posted a video while I was trying to get grounded. So I was out in nature and walking around, and started recording and started getting into this conversation about this thought, this reflection about capitalism, and how it disconnects us from our bodies. It disconnects us from spirituality, and spirituality in the sense of our memory, spirituality in the sense of, our ability to be aware, our ability to have the energy and the capacity to advocate for ourselves. Capitalism keeps us on this hamster wheel of sameness, of our routine, right? Which keeps us very tired. And so that impacts our ability to advocate for ourselves. It impacts our ability to think our ways out of and through whatever kind of challenge, that we're in. And so, this thought about, we're going through all these mass situations, um and we're supposed to just show up to work, or show up in our relationships, show up in our parenting, show up in our caregiving, whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing at 100%. All the while, we have these really, really heartbreaking situations happening, and it's also this push and pull between, collectivism, right? Like, if you take the time out that you need to grieve and really reflect on these things, like, that's the collective action. Moving into, this place of not being able to do that keeps us in this individualistic mindset. Oh, that's not happening. Oh, it's happening, but I don't really need to be connected to that because I got to go to work. So again, all white supremacy.
Listen here. I was like, I mean, you said everything I was like feeling in my heart. Like, a lot of this disconnect is designed to keep us individual. Like, it really perpetuates individualism. And yeah, and also like this idea, you're right about this disconnect from memory. Whew. I mean, I feel like there's a connection between this disconnect from us, like the disconnect from where we're at. Like you said, where are you earlier? I love that question. Like, where are you? Right? I'm right here. Like, my feet are firmly planted in the ground. I'm here. Right? Like, that experience of just being like acknowledging presence, acknowledging earth, nature, the body. It's like and also it's like memory and remembrance, right? Like acknowledging that there were people who worked hard for me to be here. And it also makes space for the gratitude of community, like being in community with you right now. Like, like y'all, like we're saying this to y'all because this idea of like learning how to come back to ourselves or come back home to ourselves, this practice of this is decolonization. This is spiritual and this is collective work. You know, me working on reconnecting to myself benefits community. And it's not individualistic. This is collective, being able to do that. It connects me to earth. It connects me to ancestors. It connects me to Sequoia. It connects me to you, those who are tuning in right now or watching the recording. Like, this is not like, and I'll say this because I remember I used to work in a lot of activist spaces, like as a healer with activists. And a lot of times I had to remind the activists to be like, hey, let's come back. Like, let's be here, like, because that culture of urgency was really like rampant in activist spaces too. And a lot of times they didn't really notice. It wasn't their fault, you know what I mean? Because there was like a sense of crisis. Sometimes crisis fuels urgency. Or we respond to crisis urgently. So I don't think it's either or. I'm just saying, like, it depends on the person and their trauma. I don't think it's that clear cut. But I think sometimes crisis sparks things in people. Mm-hmm. And I found in certain spaces that I worked in and supported, people were navigating, there was so much urgency and they didn't realize what they were doing sometimes, like some of the harm they were replicating, because they were so like, oh, we got to get this done. Like, this is urgent. Oh, actually, let's slow down, let's come back. Let's really reconnect. Let's re-examine that. We have to, like, what does urgent mean right now? And a lot of times urgency was actually really colonizing, like that they weren't even noticing it. It was like through the work. So like the work of awareness is central to like decolonization. And it connects us to one another. This idea of like awareness and this unlearning, learning, relearn. So we want to, we hope that we're really passionate about this. And we hope that y'all really, again, there's things that you're taking away from this conversation. And if it feels like it might be going too fast, you come back and you watch it again, or you pause us, or whatever, whatever you do with these videos. But, I think part of it for us is like, we have to invite this process of unlearning so that we can learn and then learn again. And we can't do that if we don't examine the ways that some of the things we do are causing more harm and are replicating the harm that we say that we're trying to dismantle and deconstruct. Like, we can't do that without this process. And if you say that you're spiritual, it's just me. If you say that you're spiritual, then decolonization has to be a part of it. Just don't, no, I just feel like that just doesn't vibe for me. Like, this process has to be a part of it. Like that's sacred work. Like, all of that goes together. And I think sometimes people want to act like that that's not a part of it. And that's just not true.
Yeah. Yeah. This was, a timely conversation. I feel like, we could have a few different conversations, about this particular topic, and I appreciate, again, your thoughts, your examples, your reflections on these things. I think for our profession, but then of course, just anyone who is kind of navigating, applying a spiritual framework for themselves, for their work, ways to really think about how can I check in with myself? How can I be intentional about that? I think that, again, this framework of unlearning, learning, and relearning is a great way to not only interrupt urgency, but also to really interrupt colonization, active colonization. So if you're ready, Biani, should we transition into the next thing? What you thinking? Or do you have some final kind of thoughts that you want to say about anything?
Well, I want to say too that I really appreciate your examples and your reflections, and it's also shaping and influencing me in my work, in my daily practice. So I just wanted to say that.
Mm-hmm.
it's really shifting the way that I'm kind of thinking about my work too, with others too. Yeah. So we're still learning. We're always learning too, you know? Yeah, I'm
Definitely.
ready to move on to the next two if you like. I'm cool.
Okay, okay. Well, this is, the part of the podcast where we get into a little bit of sharing and telling. I One of the things that has been different about this particular episode is that we're live. Our first two episodes we pre-recorded, and then we decided, like, oh, we want to be able to talk about the things that are currently happening, and if folks have some direct questions that they want to ask us while we're talking about whatever the episode is on, we want to make sure that we can respond to those things. And so I really enjoyed, being live for this particular episode, and look forward to the next one. But so usually at this segment, we share a little bit about a particular item that we have. And this segment was uh, kind of organized around this love for show and tell during elementary school, and just hearing more about how other folks, what toys they had, or what item that they wanted to share with the class, and what their households kind of look like based on what they might share and tell. And so yeah, we've got a little something special this time. uh, we came up with a tarot spread based on the framework, the spiritual framework, unlearning, learning, and relearning. And then we have some items that we want to share with you all. I can
Yeah,
start
yeah. Do you
off
want
with
to
the ones
start?
that I
Yeah.
have. Yeah, that's fine. So let's see, the first one that we did, the first share and tell that we did, I shared a book. The second one I think was a deck. And so this one I wanted to share some sprays that I have. Um, I am someone who likes smoke rituals, so I like Palo Santo and candles, and things, and sage and things like that. But in certain spaces, like usually in like office spaces, and then in some homes, if you are around folks who just can't tolerate those type of aromatics in the air. I oftentimes recommend to my clients, but then also use for myself, spiritual sprays. So I have one that's a crystal infused rose spray, and it has roses in it, crystals, and what is this? Essential oils and clear quartz in the bottom of it. And then the other one that I have is called a empath clearing spray, and it's for clearing, grounding, protection, and smudging. And so this one has in there traditional herbs, white flowers, and pure essential oils. And so usually, whenever I want to clear the energy, either between readings, between my therapy sessions, between meetings, or if I need to, if I want some grounding, and I don't necessarily want to light anything, I'll spray. I'll spray one of my sprays. And yeah, I really, you can also just get like, and I think it's called like Desert of the Valley, but I'm picturing like the pink bottle with the white label, and it's just like a rose water. I love rose water spray. There's sage spray as well. So any type of spray that you kind of gravitate towards for grounding and clearing and things like that. It's cool. So I just want to share the two that I have.
I also love that. I just want to kind of put a pin there too, because I like that you're also inviting us to think about ways to ground, center, and clear in between like sessions, in between your work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we need that reminder too, to like be in that ritual. That's ritual, to just sort of be able to like center, close like the energy, take care of your energy and your boundaries. So I love that. Yeah. Sometimes I kind of do like a DIY spray, something my family does. Like we put like Florida water, a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
water, like, charge a crystal, and I spray that. But I do love buying the ones that people make because there's like such a beautiful intention behind it. And the ones you described, I might have to ask you where you got those offline.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, thank you for that. And that
Yeah.
reminder to like ground and set boundaries. And yeah. Um, I'm sharing another book. I think I shared a book before. I don't remember, but it's all good. I This book is called "We Were Made for These Times" by Kyra Jewel Lingo. It's 10 lessons for moving through change, loss, and disruption. Um, and this book has really been like a book I've been carrying, which is funny. Sometimes I find it hard to find because like I'll read it at night, fall asleep with it, or um, she used to be she was a Buddhist nun for like 15 years, and then decided to leave and come back into the world. And she trained really closely with Thich Nhat Hanh. And so, yeah, it's just like a really beautiful, simple book with a lot of messages and wisdom. And I wanted to share with everybody something that I've been practicing daily that I found to be really helpful. And she calls it the 5 happinesses. Um, and you don't have to do all 5 every day, but I try to do at least one in my ritual. So the 5 happinesses is to make space for meditation or prayer or quiet time in whatever form that means to you. Exercise, some form of exercise. At the end of your day, recall at least one moment of gratitude. Do a random act of kindness, and journal a happy moment.
I
And
love those.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't do all 5 every day, but I try to do at least one. And it's something that I've been, it's just been really grounding
I
to
bet.
hold the
Mm-hmm.
grief and the pain with the gratitude of like today I was watching one of my kids like have a real like laughing so hard, having such a great time in the playground. And I don't know, it just made me so happy to be fully present with them. Like that moment right there was like, wow, like I'm grateful I have a child who's happy, just like that moment. And so, yeah, I'm grateful for this author, and we will share it. We'll see if we can, we can put it in the description, but this is the book. Oh, maybe you could put it in your bookshop. I was just like, we could put a link in, just volunteering your bookshop link. But it might be nice to like, this is, oh, you can see the book. Okay. We were made for these times.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a great title. So yeah, those are the 5 happinesses.
Thank you for sharing those. Thank you for sharing that resource. I think that that is lovely. I hadn't heard of that book before, so definitely interested in picking that up. Do you want to share a little bit about the tarot spread and like
Yes,
where folks can find it and so on?
that's a good question.
Okay.
So we are really excited, y'all. We made our first spread. So this is the first Reclaiming Soul Work podcast spread, and we're super hype about it. And we're gonna make it available. First dibs on our newsletter subscribers. You're gonna get that in your inbox soon. And then we're gonna put it on our pages. So y'all need to follow us on Instagram. Um, and if you're like, hey, I really need a copy, you can email us too. You're welcome to email us. But if y'all follow us on Instagram, it will be available there. And those who subscribe to our newsletter, so you might want to hit the link and subscribe to our newsletter so that you can get first dibs on these amazing spreads, and we'll have more to come. Um, but yeah, if it's too much trouble, feel free to email us and we'll send it. I mean, like if there's a way to put it in the comments, I don't know, but I'm happy to share it. So this spread is a 3-card spread, and it's using the same framework that we've been meditating, holding, like guiding us today. Unlearn, learn, relearn. Yes, there goes that email. So you can email us, reclaimingsoulworkpod@gmail, if you want a copy of the spread. You're welcome to do that. So I have a deck here, and we Sequoia and I were thinking of just offering a collective reading using that spread so that people can experience it in real time. And then you can do it yourself. It doesn't have to be with tarot cards. If you do not work with the tarot, you can use Lenormand, affirmation, oracle cards. You can even just journal if you wanted, because we do have prompts included in the spread. So we're going to pull a card for each one. We're going to pull a card for unlearn, a card for learn, and relearn. And that is going to be a part of the collective reading for today. I already shuffled. And I want to share the deck that I'm using is the Queer Tarot. It's a deck that Sequoia and I both are starting to, we just got it. We're working with it. And that's the guidebook. And yeah, let's. Just grounding. And for those that are tuning in, this reading is for you if you consent to it. Okay? Only if you consent to it. Just know that. This reading is only for those who consent to it. But we're offering this reading to the collective. And if it's something that resonates for you, please enjoy. So the first card, unlearn. Second, learn. Oh, thank you for writing it, Sequoia. That's perfect. And relearn. So the first card is Six of Cups. Oh, and I also want to invite Sequoia to, you're welcome to share what comes up for you. And this is in the unlearn position. So what are some things we need to unlearn? We pull the Six of Cups. And then the learn position, we have the Queen of Swords. And in the relearn position, we have the Fool.
Wow.
I know, what a reading. Let's
see.
Oh, I did that backwards. Okay, y'all get it. Six of Cups, Queen of Swords, and the Fool. So in the position of unlearning, I love that there's an image of this exchange between two young people. And there's a kind of collective, like they're working together. I know the traditional meaning, but the message I'm getting is like there's something about working together. But then there's also this really beautiful thing about the past, right? Like there's something about the energy of the past. The Six of Cups often being associated as the card of nostalgia. I'm getting the message of inner child right now and younger parts. And so when we're thinking about what we are invited to unlearn from our past, we're being asked to go back too, to kind of explore some early childhood, to explore what we've learned that really didn't serve us. And what would it be like to really like be with it, examine it, so that we can really release it. So it's like a really potent card to get in that position, don't you think?
Yeah. Like, I was gonna say,
what are you noticing?
Yeah, I feel like also, you mentioned the word nostalgia, right? That's associated with this card. And so really looking at, and I'm getting more of like related to whatever profession we're in. So thinking about why you decided to go into the helping profession, what's connecting you to this particular field of work, really thinking about where your heart is even now about that, how have these past experiences in our profession, how has it changed you? How have these experiences maybe related to violence, harm, disappointment, frustration, toxic work environments, how have those things impacted the ways that you're showing up?
I love that. Oh, I love that it's true. It's like about going back and exploring. What was your why? Start there. Start with your why. What brought you to this field? What are your values? Like, is what you're doing right now aligned with your core values? Like, is there alignment? If there's not, why? Like, you have to really explore that. You're absolutely right. I love that. Okay, let's go to the next card.
Okay.
Okay, and you fell. So you probably trying to tell me something. All right, and in the learn position, we have the Queen of Swords. And I think I did that backwards now that I realize it, but it's cool. No, I didn't. Okay, so learn, right? This invitation to examine the truths. That's what I'm seeing. Like, what truths do we need to like learn? Now that if we look at the unlearn card, the Six of Cups, like re-examining, going back to our why, and then can we sit with the truth of what we've learned, and how do we move forward with that truth? Like, what's true for you, and actually, what was true before that's not true anymore? You know, because the Queen of Swords deals with the truth, the tough love. Like, this person's like, this tough love moment. You got to be real with yourself. Like, what's really going on? And also, what are some behaviors, patterns? What are you doing that's actually not serving you or the people in your life? Like, what are some colonized kind of habits? Like, kind of what we've been talking about today. Like, what are some of those things that you're doing that you need to really examine and deconstruct and put to rest? I mean, this person, like, you know, you come to them, you're going to get the full truth. It's not, no games right now, no real games. they're not coming to play. They're dealing with what's there. Yeah, what are you getting?
I was gonna say,
What are you
well,
noticing?
add to, you know, I wanted to highlight, right? Queen of Swords is air energy, and like winds of change kind of came to my mind, and like this acceptance of, you know, like it's okay if things are different. You know, like you don't have to do things the way that you used to do them. You know, like it's okay to integrate and embody, you know, some of your understandings, your newfound understandings based on your experience, you know, that you're not like abandoning people, places, and things because you've grown.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, like I'm kind of getting step into the you, right? Like, what would it be like for you to be you? And I think we really struggle with that too, right? Because we are so concerned about like what others will think, an image, right? And I think this queen, you're right, it's air energy. This queen doesn't really care about what others think. They really have grown through the edges. They've grown on the edges. And they really don't care about what people think. And they're inviting you to actually really examine those people-pleasing patterns, acknowledging that a lot of it is tied to trauma, because I also don't want people coming at us with the comments like, well, we do understand people-pleasing, y'all. We get that. But also there's an invitation to really think about what would it be like to do the things that you really feel like are like that you want to do. Okay, well, let's get to the Fool, which I think it's amazing to get this Fool card in this position.
All of those cards. I'm just like, okay, come on, universe, come on,
really
spirit,
well.
Come on, spirit, come on, divine, come on, God, whatever you identify with.
And it's so in line with what we've been talking about too. So tell me, why don't you start? Like, what are you noticing around the invitation from the Fool?
Yeah. So with this one, the Fool in the relearn position, you know, I feel like it's a caveat just from the last Queen of Swords energy, right? Like it's okay to be different. It's okay to explore new things. It's okay to ground in, you know, indigenous practices, you know, things that are more connected to this leap, you know, that you want to take. Yeah, like it's okay to explore. It's okay to try things out, you know, to be inquisitive, to ask questions.
I love that. I couldn't have said it better. I love that. I love the idea of, I love the invitation from the Fool to kind of like lean into the curiosity.
Mhm.
Let yourself ask questions. Part
Mhm.
of relearning is inviting us to ask questions again. What is it that you need to remember that you forgot, right? Like when we're talking about ancestral indigenous practices that belong to you, to your heritage, to your story, to your family system, to your family, chosen family included. But yeah, like I love this idea of like, yeah, you get to give yourself permission to do that, to
Yeah.
reconnect again.
Definitely, definitely. I love that, and again, just this, I feel like there's this thread with those three cards that came out, for this particular spread, that reaching back piece, in that
Mm,
full card, the person has a little sack on their stick, right? And so you're reaching back into not only your memories, but also like, again, this integration, right? Like it's not like you're going to be someone completely different, right? Like you have these experiences, you have this
mhm.
knowledge, and it's okay to integrate things that you have from your past or previous knowledge and experiences into these newfound experiences and knowledge as well. And that's authenticity. It's okay to be authentic.
I love that. And I also like looking at the interaction between the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the Queen of Swords is calling the Fool in. And there's something really powerful about that energy. I don't know if the Queen is calling the Fool to join the young people who are holding the chalices with the, like, because they're like they planted these new flowers, right? Like they're birthing something. And sometimes we have to go back. It reminds me of the Sankofa, like go back and fetch. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we have to go back in order to move forward. And this is what we're inviting y'all. Like when we talk about this framework of unlearn, learn, and relearn, sometimes we have to go back to our past or reconnect with that why to
Mm-hmm.
really be able to move forward. And we also have to really be able to ask the tough questions. That's a form of like acceptance and being loving towards ourselves and those in community, like asking those tough questions. Um, and being real with ourselves about
Yeah.
why we do what we do sometimes. So yeah.
I
Why don't
love
you?
that.
Yeah, you love that. Okay, I,
Yeah.
I want to say for those who are watching, let us know in the comments what you think.
If it
If it
resonated.
resonates, if this reading
Mm-hmm.
resonated, if you have any questions about what we talked about, we'd
Mm-hmm.
love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're watching it now or watching the playback, just let us know what you thought of that reading, and if you'd like to see more of things like this from us, it'd be awesome. And we will share the spread for folks who are subscribed to our newsletter, and then we'll also put it on our Instagram pages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we are nearing the end. We are nearing the end. And I'm kind of sad, but excited. And I want to thank you all for being with us today on Reclaiming Soul Work podcast. We are so happy that you could join us. And we hope you'll be back. We hope you'll be back because we'll be back. We'll be back in 2 weeks with episode 4. And we are so excited. So in the meantime, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel. And I want to task you with something. If there are 2 to 3 people that you think will really enjoy this episode, tag them in the comments or share the episode with them. We'd love to hear from them too. Um, and of course, you want to subscribe because you'll be notified immediately when we go live in 2 weeks. Next, we're going to talk about, actually, we're going to do some myth busting. We're going to bust some myths about what spiritual therapy is and what it isn't. There are many assumptions and stereotypes that Sequoia and I have had to navigate in this work as spiritually inclined therapists. And we really think it's time for us to really make space. And maybe we're channeling that Queen of Swords because they did show up for us. We're channeling the Queen of Swords, and we are channeling Pride because this is Pride Month, y'all. We are channeling our ancestors to really bust some myths about the term spiritual therapist, spiritual counselor, spiritual practitioner. And, we feel free to share any like stereotypes or myths that you've heard. We'd love to like be in conversation with you about it. But yeah, you don't really want to miss this episode. Okay. And yeah, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll close us out.
Yeah, close us out.
So thanks everyone for being in community with us and supporting our Heart Center podcast by two queer Black femme social workers, healers who explore the intersections of magic, spirituality, identity, and ancestral connections through the lens of tarot, divination, mysticism, mental health, and everything in between. As Biani mentioned, we would love to stay connected with you, and there are a few ways that you can do that. Not only by helping us build our spirituality and healing community by tagging folks or sending, the link to individuals. You can subscribe to our YouTube page at Reclaiming Soul Work Podcast. Once you subscribe, you can set a reminder for notifications for when we are going to release an episode. You can also sign up through the landing page on our website for our newsletter, and you'll be notified of when we have a new episode coming out. And our future offerings, especially just getting that information for our tarot spread. There was something else. Oh, Spotify. You can check us out on Spotify right now. We're thinking about expanding to other platforms, but for right now, you can find our episodes on Spotify. So please like this, like on YouTube. Also, please rate us on Spotify as well. That would be amazing. And I think that's it.
I also wanted to add, because we mentioned that we do have a newsletter, y'all. It's our first quarter moon newsletter, and it comes out every first quarter. And the next one is coming out tomorrow. So if you want to sign up to get in on our newsletter and some freebies that we have, just sign up to the newsletter too. And we can have more fun offline, off YouTube and Spotify. So yeah, just wanted to say that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sequoia. Thank you to those who are tuned in. And we'll see y'all in episode 4.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Have a good Monday.